So they say that California Public Employees Retirement System, also known as CalPERS, the largest pension in America, has $611 billion in debt, and it's 72% unfunded. So, as Joe Biden would say, America is back, baby.
Wow, those are some incredible statistics. It sounds like someone has been asleep at the wheel for quite some time managing that fund. But if you're working government, like what's really results to you anyway, right? Don't you just sit at a desk? Like it must be like the greatest job on earth. You have, so many federal holidays going on. You don't actually have to produce results if you're not in the field, like an enforcement network or something like that. It must be great.
There is probably a lot of abdication of responsibility towards achieving specific, measurable, achievable goals because the goal there is really to just do a good enough job to not get fired.
They show up, they punch the card in, they type at the computer all day, they send some emails. What a life. What a life. Meanwhile, all the people who have worked for their pension, they either get to enter a world in which they have a lot less of the money that they were promised, or the inflation that affects everyone, inflation, would just be maxed out by the government bailing out this pension fund. So there's some nice choices for those people who have worked hard all their lives to contribute to a system that ultimately has been completely mismanaged into the ground.
That is a really bad dilemma. I can't imagine being in that position. I get that letter or the email saying, hey, we appreciate how hard everyone has worked. And we are deeply emotionally saddened by the fact that we're only going to pay out about 50 to 70% of your pension now that you've been working towards and contributing to. And yeah, we're just not going to be able to pay it out because we either mismanaged your money or due to economic global turmoil, whatever the case may be, you're not getting what you put into the system back. That's like, oh, cool. I'm 65. I can't fight it. I can't do much about it. And now I almost have to accept these results.
Yeah, yeah. Meanwhile, anyone who could have originally perpetrated this fraud is long gone, retired. They're gone from the system. They're probably not going to be blamed for anything either. So even if it was like from John Johnson back in the 90s or whatever, who originally perpetrated this fraud, these people are probably long gone. They already engaged with the con, and we're just kind of picking up the scraps, the fallout from it.
They
It's really
might have,
disappointing.
it's quite possible they were even rewarded for such catastrophic and destructive behavior. And if any of you did your own taxes or have done them in the past, you may have noticed um, mentions of a golden parachute. And what that is basically you can be in charge of a lot of money, screw up really badly, and then the company pays you a bonus to leave. So, like, listen,
Man,
you
that is
just
so much better than working at McDonald's.
as like any low level person, if you mess up and you can't make amends, or they're just for whatever reason they cut the cord real quick on you, you're terminated. But if you mismanage a lot of money that affects other people, then they give you a golden parachute and you make even more money as a thank you for the cataclysm that you've created. And then they tell you to have a nice day and a nice year when you look for your next company to screw up in. It's like, boy, that's quite a setup. I get paid for negative results.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I'm just imagining the people who defend bailouts for these companies. And it's like, you kind of just want people to learn their lesson at some point. You don't want them to like, be incentivized to engage in the same behavior. But no, you're right. We should just keep putting bandages on the problem. It's
Yeah, it's their knowledge. Their knowledge is so valuable. We don't want to discourage them. You can't restrict the creative juices that are flowing. You got to pay them more. Pay them more money. They're just like the government. If they just had a little bit more of your money, they could solve all the problems.
It's amazing. It's these same 60-year-old people who have been in business for 35 years but don't know how to use their email properly. It's just fucking incredible. I'm sure whatever they learned in college back in the 1970s still applies today. Who knows?
It would almost be like if your first day in office, you shut down a pipeline, fired 55,000 oil workers, made it so obtaining a permit to continue drilling or drill in new areas was financially prohibitive or bureaucratically a labyrinth to work through, and then act surprised when there is an oil shortage.
I thought it was Putin's fault. All right. Because I, like every other American, just watch the news and we're just like, oh, yeah, whatever they're saying must be honest and pure. And we'll just watch 3 dozen advertisements by Pfizer in a row and then talk about how there can't be anything possibly wrong with anything that they produce, even though they've had some of the biggest lawsuits that we've ever seen in the United States. It's amazing. It's amazing that we've outsourced everything to anyone. We just have stopped caring about exercising the freedom that was so hard fought for this country into everyone else's hands. Yeah, we'll just sure I'll accept that pension. I don't give a shit. It'll happen in 30, 40 years from now. I'll just won't worry about it. I'll just think of that, my retirement's being taken care of by someone else. And I'll just completely abdicate all of my responsibility to my own existence.
It's an isolationist policy that is understandable but shouldn't really be acceptable because we are not separate from this world. We're deeply interconnected. And as much as we might like to just live off the grid, we're going to be isolationist. I don't want to have anything to do with this mess that we've created. Unfortunately, the mess will end up in your backyard and will consume you. It will consume the nation, consume the globe. Unfortunately, one of the things that we've been working towards is just military dominance instead of some other sort of more mutual friendship that was built on cooperation and mutually beneficial. It's really just been beneficial for the US to print a lot of money, hand over monopoly money to other countries in exchange for real assets, minerals, metals, commodities, food, oil. And now other countries just have our debt, which we could just default on or just freeze their accounts. And this is like how the petrodollar works, where you just make it so everybody else has to use the US dollar to buy oil. And that works out really well for us until they realize that they don't have to do that, which is what Saudi Arabia has recently done, where the crown prince said he's done pleasing the United States. They're cutting oil production by 1.5 million barrels a day for the rest of the year. And, previously our commander in chief had said that we're going to treat them like the pariah they are, which is an outcast or someone who's despised and avoided. And then he had to go over and kiss the ring and fist bumped them and asked for more oil. And that whole thing was just so strange because we have oil here. So there's this
That were
weird,
prevented from drilling and using.
yeah, pretty much. And obviously there is uh, a lot to dissect there, but it is very much most of the weight of the culpability is mostly, I would say, on the government's roadblocks that they've purposefully erected in the name of climate alarmism, as I will call it, in my opinion. It's a weird just attempt at control, but we end up with this production sovereignty issue that we wanted to talk about, where we just don't, we're capable of making all the things that we need, but we don't, which creates a vulnerability for us globally. And for example, right now, with Taiwan reportedly being completely surrounded by the Chinese military, fighter jets, ships, an aircraft carrier, and they make I think 60% of the semiconductors that run all chips, and then like 90% of all the highly specialized electronics. Um, we could just make these in the US and then we would be less affected by this. Literally everything uses a chip. And then there's also the uh, the moral, the ethical implications of what do we do if China does invade Taiwan? Taiwan want they if they see themselves as independent, the mainland thinks that they're subordinate to them. It's really easy for a lot of people online to volunteer someone else to go fight that war. It's I don't even. I mean, I know I've opened up a can of worms on like four different things from oil to Taiwan, but this is the weird global game that is being played out right now that's going to affect all of us, whether it's your retirement or how much you're paying at the pump, or whether we even have technology available to us to use.
Yeah, yeah, and the people that are going to be affected, I mean, obviously, it's going to be us of this generation because we're looking forward to dealing with all these issues later on because our forefathers, unfortunately, and I can't necessarily blame them all for it, but they were not vigilant, and all of this shit has completely crept up. Or even worse, they were implicit in it because they thought they can get a good deal out of it. But unfortunately, this is the end result. It's one thing to be America's bitch; it's another thing to be another country's bitch. And I think for us as Americans who have been top of the world, I think it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing on top of the fact that we've fought for these freedoms so much over the years just to abdicate them, just to throw them all away, throw them just completely out the window. Who cares? I just need to be in my safe space. Don't harm me. I'll do whatever you say.
How much of an impact do we really make if, when you rapidly evacuate a country, that it's overtaken by a terrorist organization completely within 3 days when you've been there for 20 years prior?
Yeah, it sounds like Biden's doing a much better job building back the Taliban better than the United States.
Yikes. We have a
How
long history of
embarrassing.
oof. Now, you had been saying something prior to this recording about other places of production for these things, even if it's not in the mainland of the US, that it could be closer.
Oh yes, yes. I don't exactly remember the podcast I was listening to, so I'll have to get back to people on that. But essentially, it was a little bit of history in which, back in the day, the United States had a choice, necessarily of like we were originally thinking about outsourcing our materials, which was not a good idea to begin with. But at least it could have been closer to home because it could have been in Mexico rather than in China. But the idea, I think, more or less was we'll use China because they're trying to turn communist, and maybe we could turn this ship around. So it was a little bit more of a global positioning game that was being played. And it pretty much backfired on us because not only did China remain being communist, but we then also created this terrible inner working system of us being addicted to cheap Chinese goods and materials and China buying or essentially using our debt to keep their own um, economy depressed. And the reason why it needed to be depressed is so it had that trade advantage. So its goods were cheaper. And that's a little bit of a strange, consequence of currency transfers when you're at a global scale. I learned it back in the day in my international economics class. I don't know if it's even relevant anymore, but that was at least the gist of the idea of what was going on.
They said, sure, we'll take your money and then spend it as our culture sees fit for our long term gains. And that's just part of the weird situation that we find ourselves in. And they're sitting on a lot of natural resources. I think that they have the most precious minerals in the world within their country's borders, with number two being the African continent, which they're also setting up shop in and controlling it economically, while we spent time militaristically just bombing countries that we didn't agree with. And, for example, bombing civilian restaurants in Yemen and then getting a lot of innocent people killed in an attempt to take out a few targets. Uh,
No war
and if
crime
we
there.
no crime there because it was in the pursuit of justice.
Yeah.
So everything in today's day and age is just a means to an end, and as long as your heart was in the right place on paper, then you're free and in the clear.
And as long as the rest of the regime supports you, that's also very important. As long as you're not a pariah in your own party. In fact, if you were beloved by your party so much so that your vice president is now the meat puppet president that is around today. It's frankly embarrassing, everyone. And I think I want to kind of stay on this point that maybe my goal in this whole venture, not only of podcasting, but thinking about my long term goals, is just like bringing back manufacturing to the United States. Is just it's going to be inevitable if we want to survive. Because there's no way that we'll be able to compete on a world stage without having some sort of access to homegrown electronics. So whether it's in that realm or in others, we cannot be so reliant on outsourcing everything. I mean, there's also like a personal responsibility problem here. It's like, what kind of people are we if we just outsource everything? We're just going to be like these blobs disconnected from Earth, disconnected from each other. We don't have a community here. You know, if we want to do something about pollution, we have to own that pollution. You know what I mean? Like, if we want to do good in the world, we have to have responsibility. We can't just say that we're disconnected from it and therefore it never applies to us. We're responsible for that pollution in China by buying Chinese products,
This is a
and
good
yet
example.
we're almost just like so myopically focused on everything that doesn't matter. It's embarrassing.
It sounds like an extrapolation or sorry, an extension of a not in my backyard problem, which is just, these things are occurring whether they occur in the US or outside the US. Really, they should occur in the US because we have the most technology, so we could do these same processes in the most environmentally sustainable way if that's something that we really did believe in. But instead, who do you think makes cleaner refined oil? Like somewhere in the US using state of the art technology, or somewhere in the middle of South America, somewhere in Southeast Asia. They're using dirtier technology and they're willing to do so. Uh, so, and we still use all these products. We still like looking into how batteries are manufactured, the child labor that's involved, the toxic chemicals that are used to separate metals, the incredible energy processes used to separate different ions and elements, everything from whether you're using gasoline or some sort of petroleum derived substance or batteries or even solar, the manufacturing of those different panels. If you want to make windmills, like the amount of oil that spills out, literal pollution of the entire process, as well as corruption and just people doing things for ill-gotten gains and unjust enrichment. There are still a lot of victims with green technologies that people want to look the other way on because their heart is in the right place.
But we'll just keep making new nonprofits in order to spread the message, and we're just drowning in the amount of nonprofits that we have that do absolutely fucking nothing. The fact that we can import goods that we can't manufacture here, not because we don't have the ability to, but because it is illegal for the types of processes, with the amount of human damage that can occur, and exposure to all these different processes. That should be
We'd
eye
rather
opening for everyone, but
keep the Kinder Egg banned. Like we just have weird priorities.
yeah, we'll believe any news outlet that is telling you that it's some other country's fault. You should kind of be like, no, no, the Bucks should stop here, no matter what it is. This entire blame game is fucking embarrassing. It's none of us. We're acting like a nation of children who have zero responsibility. That we're not doing anything about it. We don't care. We're turning the other way. We're gonna just go buy our Lay's potato chips and drown in Coca Cola, and then be surprised when we have diabetes and all these other slews of medical problems because, of course, we can't seem to see the connection between ultra processed foods and our own health degeneration. Must be something else. It must be all that sitting that I'm doing.
Everybody
Just
can find,
insane.
we have a lot of excuses, and there are different levels of culpability, different weights that we can assign to all of these things, but there is that personal responsibility, and we have to almost have a return to skepticism. What is the motive of other people, these companies, these entities that have something to gain by me becoming subservient to their commercial pharmaceuticals, to their sugary carbonated beverage? We really do have a sick society, and we have to take control of our health. That's our physical health, our mental health, our spiritual health, our financial health. We're addicted to credit card debt. We're becoming slaves to society. And it's just a crushing pressure that people will solve by some sort of pharmaceutical med. Oh, well, it's because, I'm sad. And that's okay. It's okay to be sad, but we really could live in the golden age. It's never been easier to manufacture things. We have the most amount of technology to make our lives easier. So the um the bloom in depression is just kind of startling, and it's unsettling to me. We have like a generation of kids that are in their 30s, but their lifestyle isn't being parents, working hard, caring for their children at large. I know that there are those out there, but for the that there seems to be an increasing trend in the number of people that are just, they would just rather swipe on their phones, scroll on TikTok, be on OnlyFans. Just imagine like the caliber of people that are like, what happens after you've been like a worker for OnlyFans and you've just been selling videos and pictures of your body for 10 years. It just seems like, what is that? What does that do to your own perspective on life later on? Like, they're probably the same people that think like men are just disgusting and the bane of society, and they're all chauvinists and it's like, wait, hold on a second, don't you have isn't OnlyFans like your form of employment? It's just very strange. It's like a digital version of like going to a strip club or something, which is, it has its own issues. I just like don't know where society's going. I understand that there will probably always be these pockets of things, but they seem to be disproportionately represented in this era where it should almost be the opposite. We have so much opportunity to do other things, to make advances in society, to contribute, to pursue the dream that you want to pursue. You can travel almost anywhere globally. You can make a startup for like the wildest new innovative ideas. You couldn't do that 200 years ago. So now, with the most opportunity in front of us, is also when we feel the most hopelessness, which is quite a strange uh, juxtaposition of this conundrum that I don't think that it really exists, and yet it seems to be true.
I think that was incredibly well said. I mean, what it comes down to and what we have to realize is that you and me are the problem. And we have to have the courage to really look at ourselves in the mirror and be like, okay, yeah, we've made mistakes, but now we're going to try to rectify it. We need to use the tools that are literally like a miracle in development. And yet we have decided to skip on the wisdom and discipline needed to really maximize those technologies. Like 30 years ago, well, I should say a little bit more, probably like 40 years ago, you had a completely different way of interacting with people. with communicating. I mean, obviously, like the World Wide Web, the internet, all of these amazing communication technologies, you can email like billionaires nowadays. You know, like it's an absolutely insane concept back in the day that you would have to like literally physically go to wherever the rich people were in order to communicate them. Maybe you can get their address. Maybe you could send them a letter. Maybe they'll reply back. I think you still have the same things today, but it's like the fact that you could open up from your own home, just like your computer, you could do a bunch of research, you could find a bunch of people, you could email them, you could say like, hey, you know, I have this business plan, blah blah blah, and you know, you could get something back, and it's like never been such an amazing opportunity, and we need to start leveraging these amazing resources in order to make our society stable. Because I think the way that we see it is that it is not stable, and it'll continue to destabilize as we become more and more infantile.
That was very well said. I think we underestimate or just take for granted how amazing laptops, computers, and cell phones are, that we have a supercomputer in our pocket. Almost every single person. They carry it around all day. It has access to the internet. And so maybe instead of like 5 or 10 second clips of somebody doing something stupid or dancing or taking a picture of their food that probably doesn't need to be immortalized and recorded for all of eternity, you could just seek out some other amount of information. The awareness of information is insane. I mean, before messaging, it might take you 5 days to mail a letter somewhere, then they have to respond to it, and another 3 or 4 days or something like that to receive it. And that's assuming you know who you're trying to reach out to. Hey, I got this idea, I'm trying to do something with it. Things move so fast nowadays that we can try multiple dreams, and we can try multiple different iterations of things we want to do way faster than before, which is a very efficient use of our time if we choose to do it that way, if we choose to use it wisely. Uh, we should really not take that for granted.
I absolutely. I think my dream on this channel is to, you know, only like when we get into the advertising space, if we ever grow that large, I would love to only promote American made products and only promote American made products that are quality. There's a lot of shitty American made products. I'm not gonna lie. I've researched a ton of this stuff over the years. And because I'm very interested in seeing like how much American made of a lifestyle can I actually live. And the truth is like you can do it with quite a bit of things. You know, there's still a lot here that's made here. They tend to be more expensive alternatives, and maybe you're not getting the most direct advantage, but I think a lot of the indirect advantage comes from the fact that by investing in more locally made products, you're forming a sort of cohesion. Like you're actually making like your own local environment better, because that's where the money's going. It's going to your neighbors. It's going to people who are making these products. It's not being sent somewhere else. It's not being sent to like a large. I mean, sometimes these are large corporations too, so I'm not going to lie about that. But at the same time, it's like, well, at least it's here, not over there. I do think that there's some much, there's like a little bit of a nationalism, a patriotism that we should embody still, because it's also where our values are. You know, like I think it's very important to maintain these American freedom values, these liberal values, and yet at the same time um, have an amount of pride in that in order to make sure that it's a stable environment for future generations. Because I mean, I would assume that most people care about their children and care about their well-being, and you don't want to just ruin the local environment for future generations, because that's a very, you know, idiotic, poor thing to do to begin with. But
It does seem like if you could build it here, why not?
yeah,
And surely building something in your state or in the adjacent state and having it travel less distance, that has to be better economically and probably environmentally than having it built halfway around the world and then flown or shipped on a boat all the way across a couple oceans, and then end up traveling more paths on the ground on farther distances. It just seems like the amount of resources to move things around, even if it's more efficient than it was in the past, the best process is no process. That's one of those things Elon Musk says. It's like, does this process even have to exist? Does this part have to exist? The best part is no part. So why make it unnecessarily complex? It's an additional point of
Yep,
failure. It's an additional drain on resources. If it could just
absolutely.
be made, if it could be made locally, then just do that.
Yeah, and I think like starting off, a lot of these things will be luxury products too. I don't think there's any way to, it's hard to like as a startup, try to create this multi 1,000 acre factory product that is able to produce tens of thousands of a certain widget. So a lot of these things I think will have to start off small, but these are things that we should invest in. But at the same time, like we shouldn't have any qualms about saying that, like, hey, it's like I know this product is made in America, but this thing sucks. Like this thing is just the worst, and I'm not going to pay anymore. Like you do vote with your dollars, and that is an important thing. But I think to prioritize as we go into a recession, more American made products, that would probably, I think, do more to help out local communities, even if it means, not maximizing your ability to spend on a diverse array of products to just invest in smaller but quality items.
This will be an interesting struggle because we are fighting against the tide. It seems to be that the trend is the 30-year-olds that are just goalless, not goal oriented, not very driven, just kind of want to sit around and get a UBI, some sort of universal basic income, have it be funded by somebody else, have an overinflated sense of self-worth that they're the greatest and they're the heroes. They know what's best for other cultures and other countries, and they're more than happy to volunteer someone else's children to go fight wars for them. That everybody wants to be a director. They're all directors and they're geniuses, and we might have to figure out a way to adjust the mindset a little bit where they're going to have to roll up their own sleeves and contribute, and not just contribute ideas. Ideas can be powerful, but also sometimes their ideas are not that good. And they just need to realize that there are workers in addition to chiefs.
Yeah, in many ways too. We could just ignore them, cut them off, ignore them. you know. But I think as the people who are listening to this and that our message is resonating with them, we have to work and we have to relearn a work ethic that America used to embody. And I don't think going down to a 4 day, like there's something to be said of a 4 day work week. If you could actually get everything that you wanted to get done in that amount of time, then you're just being efficient. But at the same time, like if we're only going to live as this 9 to 5 culture, like there really is no point to our life. We're not making anything interesting. We're not doing anything interesting. We're probably working jobs that more or less like maybe they won't even exist in 10 years with AI. Who knows? It's just if we're not taking responsibility for our lives, no one else will. And even more importantly, someone else will try to control it.